Feline immersed himself in the character of Philip Green. Meanwhile, his friendship with John grew beyond their professional connection. Ideologically, they were also on the same page, but it was not the usual recognizable liberalism. They were both revolutionaries, but it was not about civil disobedience, nor the ultimate frustration that provokes a movement to choose violent subversion. Feline's capture and imprisonment had been fortuitous, and perhaps part of his destiny and part of his training. The CIA and its connected intelligence services from Russia, UK, Israel, and other First World nations had become increasingly reactive to anything out of the ordinary. They knew Feline as Paul Cormander, freelance journalist, stringer for The Guardian, Al Jazeera, and other publications that called into question the narrative fed to the public by Fox, the Disney Empire, and the like. That was enough to put him on their blacklist. But they were also monarchists. John often reminded Philip that Plato had ultimately discounted democracy as fickle and fundamentally unsuited to good governance. John said, "Everything is about power. There are so many forms of power. All forms of power have to be in perfect balance in order to bring the universe to its next phase. Some forms of power are destined to tear apart the fabric of the world. They have to fragment the structures that hold our current civilization in its present configuration. That includes the political polarities of democracy and dictatorships. Most political systems are intended to sustain specific structures, yet are destined to destroy those same structures. Ultimately, it's not a matter of which system of governance is used, but more a question of the quality of people who occupy positions of power within those systems. The intentions and motivations of those in position are more influential and potent. Philip Green responded, "Is it better to be a weak soul in a position of power, or a powerful soul in a weak position?" John responded, "The acts of weak people in positions of power, particularly when they are accountable to no one, are ultimately self-destructive. Unconstrained political and financial power in the hands of undisciplined individuals brings those individuals and all connected with them to collapse. This is the nature of the universe." "In the meantime," said Philip, "there's considerable suffering for the innumerable victims of toxic policies. Which is worse? Extreme human suffering, physical, emotional, social, financial, spiritual, or the inconceivable human stupidity that triggers it?" This is where the discussion brings the political, the philosophical, and the spiritual together, said John. Reconciling and resolving these irreconcilable forces and angles of approach to the human predicament is our primary occupation. "Well," said Philip, "now we are at a point when so many energies and forces are implacably opposed to each other. What do you do in the face of certain catastrophe? What do you do when you know that you can do nothing?" "Sometimes circumstances appear as if nothing is moving," said John. "Everything is stuck. And the way forward is neutrality, while the pairs of opposites pull this way and that." Philip was often preoccupied by his contract with the voice. What was the power that was offered to him? What was the purpose of taking possession of such a toxic and corrupting energy? There was still plenty that eluded him and prevented any real conclusion to his philosophical meanderings. Late one Sunday afternoon, while Philip and John were walking in the New Forest, the stag appeared to both of them. "Can you see him?" said John. "Yes," said Philip, "of course. But I'm surprised that you can." They looked at each other for a moment, and it sank in. They were both working with the stag. "Did you see what's around his neck?" said John. "The crown," responded Philip. "Yes," said John, "the crown, the de Havilshires crest." Philip responded, "The ancient family. Are you a descendant?" John said, "Well, not exactly, but I believe I am descended from the royal family of the Zulus. Everything and everyone got so broken during the struggles and down through history. The colonialists broke and corrupted our traditions in so many gross and subtle ways. It was part of the policy to get us to lose our spiritual potency, our self-respect, our traditions, our cohesiveness as a culture. But the bloodline may reveal itself in some way. Probably the Sangomas can trace it." "You remember Rorke's Drift and Isandlwana?" They rewrote the history. As we know, the first casualty in conflict is truth. During the war, the calculation of karmic consequences gets very complicated. The warriors from one side reincarnate on the other side, and you don't know who is who anymore. It's virtually impossible to disentangle the accounts. Philip pondered. "I think the stag knows who is who. He holds an important key." "Democracy," said John, "can never really work in a world that is fundamentally hierarchical. People are not equal, but they do function in relation to each other more closely to the way that nature works. They call it democracy, but it's not really like that. I don't know what word I would use for the so-called system of democracy." Philip joked, "Some call it kleptocracy," and they laughed. John continued, "A ruler has to hold the power and not be contaminated by it. A good ruler has to be independent. He or she must have personal spiritual power to a vast extent. Otherwise, that ruler just takes from the people, takes from the land, and doesn't understand stewardship." "We have to articulate this carefully," said Philip. "See, the stag is hearing us. We need to discuss this with the abbot and the child at the end of our course here." "The stag is our totem," said John. "We need to know all the details of the symbolism and about the crown." They returned to their rooms in Battersea, and the intensive training and preparation to wield the power contained in the yantra as well as the narganosine transmitter. Now, their relationship was on a different footing. The stag had shown them something subtle, secret, and pulled them to a different area of the mind space. They had moved serendipitously to another level of being, just like that.